The morning sun painted the Montana sky orange as Lisa walked through her vegetable garden. Her boots left small prints in the soft dirt between rows of tomatoes and corn. She stopped to check a pumpkin vine, running her fingers along the thick green stem. 8 years of farming had taught her to spot problems before they got worse. Lisa loved this quiet life. No loud noises, no chaos, just her and the land. Her German shepherd Max followed close behind, his ears always alert. To anyone watching, they looked like any other farmer and dog enjoying a peaceful morning. But there was something different about the way Lisa moved. Her eyes swept across the fields in a pattern, checking corners and distant tree lines. Old habits don't die easy. The farmhouse sat on 40 acres of good Montana soil. Lisa had bought it with money she saved during her time in the Army. Back then, she was someone else entirely. Someone who could hit a target from over a mile away. Someone who spent months crawling through mountains and deserts. Someone who had a different name in classified files that would never see daylight. Now, she was just Lisa the farmer. The woman who grew the best vegetables in 3 counties. The one who minded her own business and never caused trouble for anyone. Her neighbors liked her well enough, even though she kept to herself. They bought her tomatoes at the weekend market and complimented her on her perfect rows of crops. What they didn't know was that those perfect rows weren't just about being neat. They were positioned so Lisa could see anyone approaching from any direction. The small shed near the barn wasn't just for tools, and the way Max was trained to sit and watch specific areas wasn't something you learn from regular dog training books. Lisa had spent 3 tours overseas in places most people couldn't pronounce. She saw things and did things that regular people never had to think about. When she came home, the nightmares followed her. The loud noises made her jump. Crowds made her nervous. So she found this place where the only sounds were wind through wheat and birds singing in the morning. Every morning started the same way. Lisa would wake up before sunrise, make coffee, and walk the property line. She told herself it was to check for broken fences or sick animals. But really it was something deeper, something that made her feel safe in a way that locked doors and security systems never could. The town of Cedar Falls was 20 minutes away by truck. Population 812 according to the welcome sign. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Except for Lisa. She was polite when she had to be, but she never stayed long enough for real conversations. People respected that she wanted privacy. At the hardware store, old Pete would always ask how the farm was doing. Lisa would smile and say fine, pay for her supplies, and leave. At the grocery store, the teenage cashiers would try to make small talk, but Lisa kept her answers short. Not rude, just careful. She had learned long ago that the less people knew about you, the safer you were. But her vegetables told a different story. The tomatoes were bigger and redder than anyone else's. The corn grew in perfect lines without a single crooked stalk. Her pumpkins won first place at the county fair 3 years running. People started to notice that Lisa knew things about farming. That seemed impossible for someone who had only been doing it for 8 years. The truth was, military training taught you to pay attention to details, to plan ahead, to solve problems before they became bigger problems. Lisa approached farming the same way she once approached missions, with careful planning, precise execution, and constant awareness of everything around her. Max was part of that awareness. He wasn't just a pet. Lisa had trained him using methods she learned in the service. He could detect strangers from a quarter-mile away. He knew the difference between the mailman, who came every Tuesday and Thursday, and someone who didn't belong. When Max's ears went up in a certain way, Lisa knew to pay attention. The farmhouse itself was simple but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a big window that looked out over the fields. Lisa had chosen it because you could see for miles in every direction. No one could approach without being spotted. The previous owner thought the location was too isolated. But for Lisa, isolation meant safety. In the smaller bedroom, Lisa kept her office. File cabinets with farming records, weather charts, and seed catalogs. But hidden behind a false wall was a different kind of filing system. Military records, commendation letters, and photographs of people and places that belonged to her old life. Sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come, she would look at those pictures and remember. The basement was where she kept her real secrets. Behind boxes of canning supplies and old farm equipment, there was a locked metal case. Inside, that case were things that most farmers would never need. Things that could reach out and touch someone from distances that would surprise people. Lisa checked on them every few months, cleaning and maintaining them out of habit more than necessity. She told herself she would never need those things again. This new life was about growing things, not the opposite. About building something, peaceful and good. But late at night, when the wind howled across the plains and Max growled at sounds only he could hear, Lisa remembered that peace was something you had to protect. The people of Cedar Falls saw a quiet woman who grew excellent vegetables and kept to herself. They didn't see the way she positioned herself in rooms to always have a clear view of exits. They didn't notice how she never sat with her back to a door. They didn't realize that her casual glances out windows were actually careful surveillance of her surroundings. Lisa preferred it that way. Let them see the farmer. Let them think she was just another person trying to make a living from the land. It was safer for everyone if her real skills stayed hidden. After all, she had come here to leave that other life behind, not to bring it with her. But sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, Lisa would stand at her bedroom window and look out across the moonlit fields. Max would sit beside her, both of them watching and listening. In those quiet moments, she wondered if running away from who you used to be was really possible, or if someday that other person would be needed again. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after lunch on a Tuesday that felt too hot for September. Lisa was checking her tomato plants when she spotted the police car coming down her long gravel driveway. Max's ears shot up immediately, and he moved to stand beside her left leg. That was his trained position when strangers approached. Lisa wiped her hands on her jeans and watched the car get closer. She knew every vehicle that belonged on these back roads. The mailman drove a blue pickup. Her neighbor Tom had an old red truck. This was different, official, and moving too fast for a friendly visit. The patrol car stopped 20 feet from where she stood, close enough to be intimidating, but not close enough for normal conversation. Lisa noticed these details without thinking about them. Her mind was already shifting into a different mode, one that analyzed threats and calculated responses. 2 officers got out. The driver was a big man with a belly that hung over his belt. His uniform looked like it needed washing and his boots were scuffed. The passenger was younger, skinnier, with nervous eyes that kept darting around the property. Lisa could tell immediately that the older one was in charge. The big officer adjusted his belt and walked toward her with the kind of swagger that said he was used to people being afraid of him. His name tag read Deputy Rodriguez, but Lisa could see in his face that he wasn't here for anything good. "Afternoon, ma'am," Rodriguez called out when he was still 10 feet away. His voice was loud and demanding, the kind of tone meant to make people feel small. "We've had some reports about suspicious activity on this property." Lisa kept her expression calm and friendly. Inside, though, her training was kicking in. She noticed how Rodriguez kept his right hand near his weapon. She saw how the younger officer was trying to circle around to her side, creating what they probably thought was a tactical advantage. "Amateur hour." "I'm sorry, officer, but I think there might be some mistake," Lisa said, keeping her voice steady and polite. "I run a vegetable farm here. Nothing suspicious about growing tomatoes." Rodriguez stepped closer, now only 5 feet away. Too close for comfort, but exactly the distance someone uses when they want to intimidate. Lisa didn't step back. She'd faced down much scarier people than this small-town bully. "Well, that's what we're here to find out," Rodriguez said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to take a look around, make sure everything's on the up and up." "Do you have a warrant?" Lisa asked. The question came out naturally, but she could see it wasn't what Rodriguez expected to hear. His smile faded a little. "Now, why would you ask about warrants if you've got nothing to hide?" Lisa had heard that line before, in different countries and different languages. It was always the same game. Make the innocent person feel guilty for knowing their rights. Make them think that asking for proper paperwork meant they were automatically suspicious. "I'm not hiding anything," Lisa said calmly. "I just believe in following proper procedures. If you have a warrant, I'd be happy to see it." The younger officer shifted nervously. Rodriguez's face was getting red. Lisa could tell he wasn't used to people who didn't immediately cave in to his authority. She was also starting to understand that this wasn't really about suspicious activity. "Listen, lady," Rodriguez said, his voice getting harder. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know trouble when I see it. And right now I'm seeing a woman who's being very uncooperative with law enforcement." Lisa felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was about power, about control. Rodriguez was the type of person who used his badge to push people around, and he'd picked her farm as his next target. He probably thought a woman living alone would be easy to intimidate. "I'm not being uncooperative," Lisa said. "I'm asking you to follow the law. If you have a warrant, show it to me. If you don't, then I need to ask you to leave my property." The transformation in Rodriguez's face was immediate. The fake friendliness disappeared completely, replaced by something ugly. He stepped even closer, close enough that Lisa could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "You know what, lady? Maybe we need to have this conversation down at the station. Maybe spending a night in a cell will help you remember how to be respectful to officers of the law." Lisa's hands stayed relaxed at her sides, but every muscle in her body was ready. She could see exactly how this would play out if Rodriguez tried to physically intimidate her. He was bigger, but slower, out of shape. The younger officer was nervous and inexperienced. Neither of them had any idea what they were dealing with. But Lisa also knew that using her skills would only make things worse. It would raise questions she couldn't answer without revealing who she really was. So she stayed calm and kept playing the role of the simple farmer. "Officer Rodriguez," she said, reading his name tag out loud. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just exercising my constitutional rights. If you want to search my property, get a warrant. Until then, I need you to leave." Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment. Lisa could see him trying to decide how far to push this. Finally, he stepped back and pointed a thick finger at her face. "This isn't over," he said. "We'll be back. And next time, things might not go so easy for you." He turned and walked back to the patrol car, motioning for his partner to follow. The younger officer looked almost relieved as they got back in the vehicle. Lisa watched them drive away, noting how Rodriguez accelerated too quickly, sending gravel flying behind his tires. After the dust settled, Lisa stood in her driveway for several minutes, thinking. Max sat beside her, still alert and watching the road. This wasn't random. Rodriguez wasn't here because of any reports about suspicious activity. He was here for a different reason entirely. Lisa walked back to her farmhouse, her mind already working through possibilities. Inside, she made a cup of coffee and sat at her kitchen table, looking out the window at her peaceful fields. The vegetables didn't care about corrupt cops or power games. They just kept growing day after day, season after season. But Lisa knew that peace was fragile. It was something you had to protect, sometimes from people who were supposed to be protecting others. Rodriguez would be back just like he promised. And when he came, he'd probably bring more officers and a lot more attitude. That night after the sun went down, Lisa made a decision she'd hoped she'd never have to make. She went down to her basement and opened the locked metal case she kept, hidden behind the old farming equipment. Inside, carefully maintained and ready for use, were tools from her previous life. She didn't want to be that person again. But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice about who you have to become. A week passed without any sign of Deputy Rodriguez. Lisa went about her normal routine, tending to her vegetables and preparing for the harvest season. But she stayed alert. Max seemed more restless too, often stopping his patrol of the property to stare down the driveway. On Thursday morning, Lisa was fixing a broken fence post when she heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching. Not just one car this time, but several. She straightened up and shaded her eyes against the morning sun. 4 patrol cars were coming down her driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that could be seen for miles. Max immediately moved to his alert, positioned beside her. Lisa counted the vehicles and did quick math in her head. If each car had 2 officers, that was 8 people coming to her farm. Way too many for a simple follow-up visit. The cars spread out in a semicircle around her farmhouse, like they were surrounding a dangerous criminal instead of visiting a vegetable farmer. Lisa noticed how they positioned themselves to block her driveway. Nobody was leaving until they decided the visit was over. Deputy Rodriguez got out of the lead car along with the same nervous young officer from before. The other cars disgorged. 6 more officers, all of them wearing the same confident expressions of people who thought they held all the power. "Morning, Lisa," Rodriguez called out, using her first name like they were old friends. "Hope you don't mind, but we brought some backup today. Got a few more questions for you." Lisa stayed calm, but her mind was racing. 8 officers for one woman living alone was overkill by any reasonable standard. This wasn't about asking questions. This was about intimidation and control. "What can I help you with today, officers?" Lisa asked, keeping her tone polite and neutral. Rodriguez pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket and waved it in the air. "Got ourselves a search warrant this time. Seems there's been reports of drug activity on this property." "Anonymous? Tips, you understand." Lisa's heart rate stayed steady, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She knew what a real search warrant looked like, and she could see from 20 feet away that Rodriguez's paper was wrong. The formatting was off. The letterhead looked cheap, and real warrants came with specific details about what could be searched and what evidence they were looking for. "May I see the warrant?" Lisa asked, stepping forward with her hand extended. Rodriguez's smile got wider, but his eyes stayed cold. "Sure thing, sweetheart. But first we need you to step back while we secure the area. Can't have you interfering with official police business." 2 of the other officers moved to flank Lisa, taking positions that would make it hard for her to move freely. Lisa recognized the formation immediately. It was sloppy and amateur, but it was definitely meant to control her movement. The problem was, these officers had no idea who they were dealing with. Lisa had been in situations where trained soldiers tried to control her movement. These small-town cops were using techniques that might work on regular civilians, but Lisa was far from regular. She let them think they were in control while she assessed the situation. 8 officers, but only Rodriguez seemed truly committed to whatever this operation really was. The others looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure why they needed so many people to search one woman's farm. "You know what?" Rodriguez said, stuffing the fake warrant back in his pocket. "Let's start with the house. Never know what kind of interesting things we might find inside." Lisa felt something shift inside her chest. They wanted to search her house without showing her the warrant. They wanted to go through her personal belongings, her private space, based on what she knew were completely false accusations. "I'd really like to see that warrant first," Lisa said, her voice carrying a new edge that made a couple of the officers look at her more carefully. Rodriguez stepped closer, close enough that Lisa could see the sweat stains on his uniform. "Here's the thing, lady. You can cooperate and make this easy, or you can keep being difficult and make this hard. Either way, we're searching this property." One of the other officers, an older man with gray hair, shifted uncomfortably. "Rodriguez, maybe we should just show her the paperwork. Keep everything by the book." Rodriguez spun around and glared at the older officer. "I'll decide how to run this operation, Peterson. You just do what you're told." Lisa caught the exchange and filed it away. Not all of these officers were corrupt. Some of them were just following orders, probably unaware that their colleague was running his own private shakedown operation. "Look," Lisa said, addressing the group rather than just Rodriguez. "I have nothing to hide, but I also have rights. If you have a legitimate warrant, show it to me. If you don't, then you need to leave my property." Rodriguez's face went red. "You want to see rights? I'll show you rights." He grabbed Lisa's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep hard enough to leave bruises. It was a mistake that revealed everything about his character and his intentions. Real police officers didn't grab innocent citizens who were asking reasonable questions about legal procedures. Lisa looked down at Rodriguez's hand on her arm, then back up at his face. For just a moment her expression changed. The friendly farmer mask slipped and something much more dangerous looked out through her eyes. "Take your hand off me," Lisa said quietly. There was something in her voice that made Rodriguez hesitate. For just a second, he seemed to realize that maybe he'd miscalculated something important about this situation. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. Instead, he tightened his grip and started to pull her toward the house. "You're coming with us whether you like it or not." That's when Lisa made her decision. She'd tried to handle this peacefully. She'd followed proper procedures and asked reasonable questions. But Rodriguez had just crossed a line that changed everything. Lisa moved with speed and precision that shocked everyone present. One moment Rodriguez was pulling her toward the house. The next moment he was on the ground. His arm twisted behind his back, gasping for air. The other officers reached for their weapons but stopped when Lisa spoke again. Her voice was completely calm, like she was discussing the weather instead of having just put a 200-pound man on the ground in less than 2 seconds. "Nobody needs to get hurt here," Lisa said. "I'm going to let him up, and then you're all going to leave my property. If you have legitimate business here, come back with proper paperwork and proper procedures." She released Rodriguez, who rolled away and struggled to his feet, his face purple with rage and embarrassment. But something in Lisa's demeanor kept him from immediately retaliating. Officer Peterson stepped forward, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion here. Maybe we should all take a step back and figure this out." Lisa nodded to Peterson, recognizing him as someone who might actually be interested in doing things the right way. But she kept her attention on Rodriguez, who was brushing dirt off his uniform and looking like he wanted to call in the National Guard. "The only confusion," Lisa said clearly, "is why 8 officers showed up at my farm with a fake warrant to search for drugs that don't exist." She'd said it loud enough for all of them to hear. Several of the officers looked surprised, like this was the first they'd heard about the warrant being questionable. Rodriguez realized he was losing control of the situation. "That's it," he snarled. "You're under arrest for assaulting a police officer." But before he could move, Peterson spoke up. "Rodriguez, let's see that warrant. Make sure everything's in order before we make any arrests." The standoff lasted for several tense seconds. Lisa stood relaxed but ready, knowing that her peaceful farming life had just ended forever. Rodriguez glared at her with pure hatred, probably already planning his revenge. The other officers looked confused and uncomfortable, starting to realize they might have been brought here under false pretenses. Finally, Rodriguez seemed to understand that he couldn't win this confrontation with so many witnesses. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at Lisa, not by a long shot. As the officers got back in their cars and drove away, Lisa stood in her driveway and watched the dust settle. Max came over and sat beside her, sensing that something fundamental had changed. Lisa knew that her quiet life was over. Rodriguez would be back, and next time he'd be more prepared and more dangerous. She'd have to decide whether to run or fight, and deep down she already knew which choice she was going to make. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring out the window at her moonlit fields. Max lay at her feet, but even he seemed restless. Every few minutes, his ears would twitch at sounds that weren't there. Lisa knew she had crossed a line today. The moment she put Rodriguez on the ground, she had revealed that she wasn't just a simple farmer. Now he would be wondering who she really was, and wondering made dangerous people do stupid things. At 3 a.m, Lisa made a decision that she'd been avoiding for 8 years. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart but had never expected to use again. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "This is Colonel Wright." "Sir, it's Lisa Chen," she said quietly. "I know it's been a long time, but I need a favor." There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then Wright's voice came back, warmer now. "Lisa, good to hear from you. What's the situation?" Lisa explained everything. The corrupt deputy, the fake warrant, the confrontation that afternoon. Wright listened without interrupting, the way he always had during mission briefings. When she finished, he was quiet for several seconds. "Sounds like you've got yourself a problem," Wright finally said. "But it also sounds like this Rodriguez character has no idea what he's stepped into. What do you need?" "Information," Lisa said. "I need to know who I'm really dealing with here." This feels bigger than just one bad cop. Give me 24 hours, Wright said. I'll see what I can dig up. But Lisa, be careful. If this guy is as dirty as you think, he's not going to just walk away. After hanging up, Lisa went down to her basement and opened the locked case she'd hoped never to touch again. Inside were tools from her previous life, but also something more important. Documents, contacts, resources that most people couldn't access. Lisa spent the rest of the night setting up a secure communication system. By dawn, she had established contact with 3 former colleagues who now worked in various government agencies. If Rodriguez was connected to anything bigger, they would find it. The next day started normally enough. Lisa worked in her garden, tended to her animals, and tried to maintain her regular routine, but she was also watching, listening, preparing. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. "We know who you are now." Lisa stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. So Rodriguez was trying psychological warfare. Amateur hour again. Lisa had been threatened by professionals in multiple languages. A text message from a small-town bully didn't even register on her threat assessment scale, but it did tell her something important. Rodriguez was escalating, which meant he was either very confident or very desperate. Either way, he was becoming more dangerous. That afternoon, Colonel Wright called back with information that made Lisa's blood run cold. Rodriguez wasn't just a corrupt cop taking bribes. He was connected to a drug trafficking operation that used rural properties as distribution points. Several local officials were involved, including the sheriff and 2 county commissioners. "It gets worse," Wright said. "Your farm sits right in the middle of their distribution network. They've probably been planning to force you out for months. You just gave them an excuse to accelerate their timeline." Lisa felt puzzle pieces clicking into place. The repeated visits, the fake warrant, the pressure to cooperate. They didn't just want to intimidate her. They wanted her land. "There's more," Wright continued. "Rodriguez has been asking questions about you, calling in favors, trying to access military records. He knows your name isn't really Lisa Chen, but he hasn't figured out your real identity yet." Lisa's stomach tightened. Her cover identity was good, but it wasn't perfect. If Rodriguez kept digging, eventually he would find threads that led back to her classified service record. And once he knew who she really was, he would understand that she represented a threat to his entire operation. That evening, Lisa began her own investigation. Using skills she'd learned in intelligence gathering, she started building a complete picture of Rodriguez's criminal network. She set up observation points around town, tracking patterns of movement and communication. What she discovered over the next few days was worse than she'd expected. The corruption went all the way to the top. The sheriff was taking payments to ignore drug shipments. Local judges were dismissing cases against connected criminals. Even some state officials were involved. Rodriguez's operation was sophisticated and well protected. They had been running it for years, carefully selecting isolated rural properties to use as storage and distribution points. Anyone who refused to cooperate was either bought off or driven away. Lisa had stumbled into the middle of something much bigger than a simple shakedown. She was facing an organized criminal enterprise with law enforcement connections at multiple levels. On Wednesday night, Lisa was reviewing surveillance photos she'd taken when Max suddenly stood up and growled. His attention was focused on the front window, ears forward and body tense. Lisa killed the lights and moved to a position where she could see outside without being seen. A car was parked on the road about a quarter-mile from her driveway. No headlights, just sitting there in the darkness. Lisa watched for 20 minutes. The car never moved, never showed any signs of activity. But it was definitely there, and it definitely didn't belong. Using night vision equipment from her military kit, Lisa confirmed what she already suspected. Someone was conducting surveillance on her property. Amateur surveillance, but surveillance, nonetheless. Lisa smiled grimly. If Rodriguez wanted to play games, she was happy to oblige. But he was about to learn the difference between bothering a farmer and stalking a trained operative. Over the next 3 nights, Lisa conducted her own surveillance operation. She documented every person who watched her property, photographed their license plates, and tracked their movements through town. What she discovered was a pattern of harassment directed not just at her, but at several other rural property owners. The criminals were applying pressure to multiple targets simultaneously, trying to acquire a network of properties for their distribution operation. Lisa wasn't their only problem, just their most recent one. Armed with this information, Lisa began planning her response. She couldn't go to local law enforcement because they were part of the problem. She couldn't trust state authorities because she didn't know how far the corruption reached. But she could do what she'd been trained to do: gather intelligence, identify targets, and neutralize threats using precision and patience instead of brute force. Lisa spent Friday night preparing equipment she hadn't used in years: night vision scopes, communications gear, and surveillance tools that would let her track Rodriguez's entire operation without being detected. She wasn't planning to hurt anyone. She was planning something much more effective. She was going to gather evidence that would destroy Rodriguez's criminal network and expose every corrupt official involved. Rodriguez thought he was hunting a frightened farmer who had gotten lucky during one confrontation. He had no idea that he was actually being hunted by someone with years of experience tracking dangerous targets in hostile territory. The game was about to change, and Rodriguez wasn't going to like the new rules. On Saturday morning, Lisa got dressed in dark clothing and checked her equipment one final time. Max watched her preparations with intelligent eyes, understanding that something important was about to happen. Lisa knelt down and scratched behind his ears. "Stay here and guard the house, boy. I've got work to do." As the sun set, Lisa disappeared into the Montana wilderness to begin an operation that would either end Rodriguez's criminal empire or force her to abandon the peaceful life she'd worked so hard to build. Either way, the quiet farmer named Lisa Chen was about to become someone much more dangerous. Lisa moved through the Montana darkness like a shadow. Years of training in hostile territory had taught her to be invisible when she needed to be. Tonight, she needed to be a ghost. Her first target was Rodriguez's house on the outskirts of town, a modest two-story place that looked normal enough from the outside. But Lisa knew that normal was often where you found the most secrets. From her position in the tree line 300 yards away, Lisa used military-grade night vision equipment to study the property. Rodriguez was home, his patrol car parked in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, she could see him talking on his phone, pacing back and forth like an angry bear. Lisa settled into a comfortable position and began documenting everything. Photos of Rodriguez meeting with unknown visitors, license plates of cars that came and went at odd hours, times, dates, and patterns that painted a picture of criminal activity. By dawn, Lisa had gathered enough evidence to fill a small notebook. Rodriguez was definitely running operations from his house, coordinating with multiple associates throughout the night. But this was just the beginning. Over the next week, Lisa conducted surveillance on the entire criminal network. She followed delivery trucks to remote warehouses. She photographed meetings between Rodriguez and county officials. She documented cash exchanges that happened in parking lots and back alleys. The deeper she dug, the more corruption she found. The sheriff was taking monthly payments to ignore certain crimes. 2 county commissioners were approving zoning changes that benefited the drug operation. Even the local bank manager was helping to launder money through fake business accounts. Lisa compiled everything into detailed reports, complete with photographs, financial records, and witness statements from other farmers who had been pressured to sell their land. She built a case that would make any prosecutor happy if she could find one who wasn't corrupt. Meanwhile, Rodriguez was getting more desperate. Lisa's surveillance revealed that he was under pressure from his criminal partners to resolve the farmer problem quickly. They were losing money every day that her property remained outside their control. Rodriguez's attempts at intimidation became more obvious and more clumsy. He started driving past Lisa's farm multiple times each day, always slowing down to stare at her house. His associates began following her truck when she drove to town. They made sure she saw them, trying to make her feel watched and threatened. But Lisa had been watched by experts in countries where being spotted meant certain death. Rodriguez's amateur surveillance team was more annoying than frightening. Lisa decided it was time to send a message. She began what military strategists call psychological operations, designed to make her opponents feel uncertain and off balance. Rodriguez woke up one morning to find all 4 tires on his patrol car flat. Not slashed or damaged, just deflated, with precision that suggested someone with professional training. The punctures were so small they were almost invisible, but they were positioned in spots that would have required shooting from a distance of at least 200 yards. A week later, Rodriguez found a spiderweb crack in his bedroom window, a single impact point that couldn't have been made from ground level, considering his second-story apartment. The crack was centered perfectly in the middle of the window, requiring precision that spoke of professional marksmanship skills. Rodriguez began sleeping on his couch, afraid to go near the bedroom window. He installed security cameras around his house and started carrying his service weapon even when he was off duty. His behavior became erratic, suspicious, and paranoid. Lisa watched all of this from a distance, documenting Rodriguez's deteriorating mental state while continuing to gather evidence about his criminal activities. She was applying pressure with surgical precision, never breaking any laws but making it clear that someone with very specific skills was watching him. The psychological campaign worked better than Lisa had hoped. Rodriguez became so paranoid that he started making mistakes. He met with criminal associates in public places where Lisa could photograph them. He made phone calls without regard for who might be listening. He left documents in his car where they could be seen and photographed. After 3 weeks of careful intelligence gathering, Lisa had enough evidence to destroy the entire criminal network. But she needed to get that evidence to someone who could act on it without being corrupted or threatened. Colonel Wright helped her identify FBI agents and state prosecutors who were clean and outside Rodriguez's sphere of influence. Lisa prepared comprehensive packages of evidence and arranged for them to be delivered simultaneously to multiple law enforcement agencies. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. Desperate and increasingly irrational, he decided to take direct action against Lisa. He gathered a group of corrupt deputies and criminal associates for what he called a final solution to the farmer problem. Lisa knew the attack was coming. Her surveillance had picked up increased communications between Rodriguez and his associates. They were planning something big, something that would happen at her farm, and something that Rodriguez thought would end his problems permanently. A Thursday evening, Lisa prepared for what she knew would be the final confrontation. She positioned herself where she could observe her entire property, with clear sightlines to all possible approach routes. Max was safely locked inside the house, away from whatever was about to happen. Just after midnight, Lisa counted the headlights, approaching down her driveway. 6 vehicles, which meant at least 12 people coming to her farm. Way too many for any legitimate law enforcement operation. But Lisa was ready for them in ways they couldn't imagine. While Rodriguez thought he was bringing overwhelming force to intimidate one frightened farmer, Lisa had been preparing a welcome that would end his criminal career forever. As the vehicles spread out around her property, Lisa activated equipment she had positioned over the previous weeks. Floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire area, turning night into day and catching Rodriguez's group completely by surprise. But the lights weren't Lisa's only surprise. Hidden throughout her property were cameras that were now broadcasting. Everything lived to FBI offices in 3 different states. Every face, every license plate, every illegal action was being recorded and transmitted in real time. Rodriguez and his criminal associates found themselves surrounded, not by Lisa, but by legitimate federal agents who had been watching and waiting for exactly this moment. Lisa's weeks of intelligence gathering had given the FBI everything they needed to coordinate a perfect trap. As Rodriguez was led away in handcuffs, he kept looking around frantically, trying to spot the mysterious farmer who had outsmarted his entire operation. But Lisa was already gone, watching from a distance as justice finally caught up with corruption. The next morning, Lisa sat on her front porch with a cup of coffee, reading newspaper headlines about the biggest corruption bust in the county's history. 12 people arrested, including the sheriff and 2 county commissioners. Millions of dollars in illegal drugs seized. A criminal network that had operated for years, finally brought down by meticulous investigation and careful planning. Max came over and sat beside her, tail wagging as he sensed that the danger had finally passed. Lisa scratched behind his ears and looked out over her peaceful fields. The vegetables didn't care about criminal conspiracies or corrupt cops. They just kept growing day after day, season after season. Lisa Chen, the farmer, was back to her quiet life. But now she knew that sometimes the best way to protect peace was to be ready for war, even if you never had to fight it. Her secret was safe, her community was protected, and justice had been served without her ever having to reveal who she really was. Sometimes the most effective battles were won with patience, precision, and the knowledge that the right evidence in the right hands could be more powerful than any weapon.